I love being here with you. I love listening to the music and the vocals. I love the hugs that I share with each of you, and I love being on the journey with you. So thank you for that.
We love you.
Thank you. So, Christ has come again? What? When did that happen? Well, we're going to be talking about that today. So I hope that you've got your listening ears on, because we're going to take a deep dive today. But before we do, I'm going to start off a little light. I'm going to do a joke. Are you ready? Let's see how that goes. All right. So there was this guy. He cracked the code on time travel. And so he time travels from 2023 to 2200. And when he time travels, he finds himself in an office with this guy. We'll call him Future Guy. And he looks at him and he's like, so has the earth been decimated? Because where I was, there was pollution, there was war, there was poverty, there was consumerism going on. And the Future Guy looks at him like he's kind of crazy and goes, no, the earth is thriving. There is enough for everyone. And the ecosystem is healthy and balanced. Well, the time traveler's a little like flummoxed by that, so he says, oh, did Jesus come again? And Future Guy goes, yeah, he did. He came, took all the Christians with him, and now we all live in harmony and peace. I heard that joke and I just screamed. And Rick's like, you've got to tell that joke. I'm like, I'm not sure about that. So I'm glad that your sense of humor is here. Thank you. So the second coming, there are a lot of aspects with the second coming, isn't there? And there's lots of novels and movies and series about the second coming, which helps to confuse us all.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of deconstruct a little bit and look at what's in the ether. How many of you remember the book series Left Behind?
Yes.
Did you read it?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing some hands, yeah. My mom was obsessed with the Left Behind series. She had every one of them. And as they came in and she finished, she's like, I got one for you, Shar. Here you go. Probably by the third one, I was like, I know where this is going. So we're good. They published their first one in 1995. And they wrote 16 novels. And then there were other kind of spin-offs and things. But it was really popular because the two that was co-authored by Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins. And they had this knack of really kind of getting into our heads about what we think the second coming would look like and all the events. And they were very descriptive. And I think that they really tapped into the collective consciousness around Christian theology and dogma. So, what kind of things, when you think of the second coming, what other events comes to mind?
Antichrist.
The Antichrist, yes. What else?
The rapture.
The rapture, yes.
The evil church.
The evil church. You gotta say it that way, you can't just say evil church. The mark of the beast. Okay, yes. 666, yes. All right.
Miracles. Course miracles. We'll all wake up.
We'll all wake up. Beautiful, yes. All right. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the rapture. Okay? How many of you were explained what the rapture is? Okay, so what is the rapture?
They come and get you. Christ comes and grabs all the Christians home.
Christ comes and grabs all the Christians home. James.
And people who haven't repented go somewhere. It's not hell, but it's the fiery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and those who are not of the Christ,
Right.
too bad for them. basically.
Yes.
Okay.
And the
All right.
raising of the dead.
The raising of the dead. Beautiful. Yes, yes. All right, so we'll start there because there was lots. Didn't you hear lots of pieces there? The Left Behind series was really about Christian eschatology. And basically that word just means last things, last things. So it's all about the end times. So when we look at the end times, the rapture is one of those things that are supposed to occur, right? And so it is a calling up, whether you are alive or dead. It's Jesus calling everyone up to the heavens to be with him, okay? That's the rapture. Now, do you know when this happens? No? Okay. Well, there's three theories, so I'll give you all three. Some people believe the rapture happens right before the time of tribulation. Some folks believe that it happens at the end of tribulations. And tribulations is like the big good versus evil war. And then some people think that there'll be two of them, one before and one after the tribulation. Okay? So it's a lot to play around with. I do want to tell you that, and it really does depend on the sect of Christianity, which one of those it's going to fit. I want to mention that in the Bible, the rapture is not used as a term. Okay? So if you were to look in the Bible verses, there's no mention of the rapture. But what it does have is, it has this verse, and it's a letter from Paul, 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 16 and 17. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we, who are alive, who are left, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we shall always be with the Lord. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So if you were taught that the Bible is literal, what would you think?
We're all going to heaven.
We're all going to heaven, right? There's going to be this uplift that happens. Oh, with the choir, the angels chorus, of course, as well. Okay, so that's if we look at that literally. But we know a little different, don't we? We have to understand what was going on during that time, right? What's the context? Why and who is writing? When are they writing? What's going on in society during that time? So this is 1 Thessalonians. So one of the churches that the Apostle Paul developed was in Thessalonica, right? And you know, if you have been following me, there's lots of letters that Paul are writing to his church communities because he hears through the grapevine, ooh, stuff's going on. And so he writes to encourage, to uplift, and to course correct, right? That's the role. So this letter was written around 50 CE, 50 CE. Okay, so this is 20 years after Jesus' death. Okay? And what the issue here is that everyone was waiting for Jesus to return. During this time, did you hear 50 CE? They're all waiting for Jesus' return. And now, some of their beloveds are dying. Maybe their mom or dad, maybe a good friend. They're all dying before Jesus' return. Not only that, they've stopped working. Would you be working if you knew the end was near?
No.
Right? So they weren't working either. So Paul figures, uh-oh, I got a problem. I've got to deal with this. And this is where now this letter comes into play. His goal here was to remind them that all is not lost. All is not lost. His goal is to inspire and uplift and hopefully get them back to working again. Right? But you notice like on 17, verse 17 there, then we who are alive, he still expected Jesus to come in his lifetime. Hear that. He was going to be lifted up. But what's the question he couldn't answer? When? When was Jesus coming again? Now, there's also a second letter called 2 Thessalonians that's attributed to Paul. However, it wasn't Paul that wrote it, more than likely, because 2 Thessalonians was written around the turn of the century, so 95, 96 CE. And theologians believe that it was a disciple of Paul that wrote the letter. So just be aware that during this time, if someone wanted people to take it seriously, they would use someone in authority as the author of the book. With me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Now, in the second letter is the first time that we're hearing about the beast. The beast. Dum, dum, dum. The beast. So the beast really was spoken about in code, right? You know, St. John did a lot of visions and writing, and also he did the book of Revelation. And they couldn't really just say, this is about Nero, right? Because they would be crucified or killed in some other way. So they used a lot of symbolism. And how they got here is because of the Jewish tradition from Daniel's. This is called apocalyptic writing. And in the Hebrew Bible, Daniel talks about the big persecutor, right? And for them, it was the ruler of Palestine. That was it. And the book of Daniel was written in 167 BCE, before the birth of Christ, or before the Common Era. I have to keep going back and forth on that. So for Paul and John, who were their beasts? The Romans, right? The Roman emperors. So it starts off with Nero, then it goes into Vespasian, and then it goes to Titus, right? Those were the enemy. Apocalyptic writing, I want you to be just aware of how scary this can feel when you're reading it. How many of you have read Revelation? Is that a light read? No, it's not a light read, is
That's
it?
why nobody read it.
And if you were taught, like I was taught, about the inerrancy of the Bible, like the Bible is perfect, right? And it's a literal interpretation, and you're going to Catholic school like I was, sweating bricks
Yes.
reading that.
Yes.
Terrified
Yes.
of like, what do I have to do so that I can either be up in the clouds or I'm like there with 1,000 years of peace? Anybody relate?
Yes.
But it's apocalyptic writing, and this is a normal kind of device used with the writers of the time. So even with the symbolism and how dark it is, they're really trying to inspire. They're trying to inspire by saying, even with all of this stuff that happens, God and good will prevail. God's got this. So there's the inspiration. It's a type of biblical literature that emphasizes the lifting of the veil between heaven and earth, the revelation of God and his plan for the world. Apocalyptic writings are marked by distinctive literary features, particularly prediction of future events and accounts of visionary experiences or journeys to heaven, often involving vivid symbolism. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So apocalyptic writing is a lift to inspire, but also terrifies you into compliance. Yes? All right. So we're going to fast forward in time. We're going to fast forward in time until the early 18th century. And we have a great spiritual awakening in the early 18th century here in the U.S. And then we have a second great awakening, which is the late 1800s, early 1900s. Notice this is happening at the turn of
The century.
Notice that, right? So in each of those waves, there was this push that Jesus was coming, and it was coming very shortly. Even to the point where there was this man who said the second coming would happen in 1843. And his name was William Miller. So the date came, kind of made a little fudge. I miscalculated the right timing, set another date. The date comes and goes. Oh, Jesus. You know. But believe it or not, the folks stuck with him and it became the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm just not a pretty face. Okay, so I want to talk about the recent spikes that we're having as far as this prediction that Jesus is coming. Like, go back in your memory for a while. The Cold War. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Jesus was coming. Why? Why was that happening?
Because it was these wars.
Right. We were on the brink of destruction because we could have a nuclear war at any point. What do you think happened in the year 2000?
Oh, my God.
Y2K, bing bing, yes. Y2K, and then also that Left Behind series. Remember I said it started writing in 1995, turn of the millennia there, right? So now it's like really up in consciousness. Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming. When do you think the next one was?
2012.
Twin Towers?
Who said 2012? Yes, Carolyn. 2012, why? The Mayan calendar. Remember there was a buzz? There's no more dates after the Mayan calendar. This is it. This is it, right? How many people went out and bought like the end of the world, like survival kits?
I bought
Right?
a t-shirt.
You bought a t-shirt? I love your heart, man. I love your heart. You saw the movie. Okay, and then when do you think the next one was? COVID. COVID. It's a pandemic, of course. Yeah. And if you've dealt with Revelation, you're thinking, it's one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Remember in the story? Like plagues were going to be coming?
Yeah, merch.
So we're now like, Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming. All right. So I'm just bringing your mind to what happens, right? Turn of the centuries. Something cataclysmic happens. Okay. Let's talk about Judgment Day. What do you know about Judgment Day?
Scary.
It's every day. Did you say it's every day? Yes, she did. It's every day. Well, yeah, I like that. We can metaphysic that one really well. It's every day. Okay, so Judgment Day. It is when everyone is judged, living or dead. They're judged. Good go where?
Heaven.
Bad go?
Hell.
Right. And this is part of the requirement for the second coming of the Christ, this last judgment day. Now, I want us to be really clear that there is a difference between the rapture and the second coming, right? The rapture is the raising the people up, right? The spirits up, living or dead. And then the second coming is Jesus comes to earth, right? And then we're supposed to have that 1,000 years of peace, right? So I just want you to be aware of what the theology is. Because if you don't know, how do you have a conversation? How do you challenge the belief, right? Okay, now, supposedly, when the rapture happens, it starts the season of tribulation, right? And it's supposed to be 7 years. And who leads this tribulation? The Antichrist, yes. Powered by Satan. Yes. Stay tuned, we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. Okay, that was the plug. Right? And then after that, what happens? The 7 years, tribulation, what happens towards the end of that? There's a war! Armageddon! Armageddon! So Armageddon simply means the hill of Megiddo. That's what it means. And for a lot of years, it was a strategic point of many wars. So it makes sense that that would be the B-roll film for this epic adventure, right? Okay, so just be aware that Armageddon is only mentioned once in the Bible, and that's Revelation 16:16. Okay, so I'm going to go on an aside for a moment. Ernest Holmes, who's Ernest Holmes? Religious science, science of mind, yes. He defines the Antichrist as someone who knows spiritual laws but chooses to use them for destruction. Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Now that's the direction we're moving into.
Yeah.
So my question then was, Jesus apocalyptic? I talked about all these writings, right? That this was kind of the writing of that period of time. So did Jesus believe in end times? Mixed reviews on this one. So you can find sayings attributed to Jesus saying about ushering God in, right? God coming again. But I did some digging on this, and there is a group of theologians that dedicated several years to understanding what did Christ probably and did say. It was known as the Jesus Seminar. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Yeah. It was a group of scholarly theologians, and they started in 1985 to 1991. And they had this weird process about red balls, pink balls, gray balls, black balls. Red was, more than likely, yes, Jesus said that. Pink, could go either way. Gray, probably not. And the black was no, he didn't say it. And so they put out a report then, after all these years of study, that said the things attributed to Jesus, he probably said 20% of them. 20%. Yeah. When they did this study, what they also did is they didn't want to only use canon scriptures, right? They wanted to go as early as possible, so they went up to 0 to 300 years to look at what were the testimonies, what was other things written during that time period. And so for them, canon texts, which is what's in our Bibles, are texts that's been approved by church leaders, right? And in that day, there was just the church, which has become known really as the Catholic Church, right? And it's a really interesting process when you do this. So this article is from John Dart, and it's from the LA Times. And he says, seminar fellows, however, years ago voted down the apocalyptic voice of Jesus when he is quoted as saying he will return someday amid tumult and turmoil. Scholars felt that the doom-saying words were put on his lips to bolster the hopes of gospel writers and their churches about 30 to 60 years after Jesus' lifetime. Interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
So the first gospel was written around 70 CE, and that's Mark. Mark is the first gospel. And then Matthew and Luke kind of took a lot of stuff from Mark and filled out, and that was written 80 CE, those two gospels, Matthew and Luke. The second Thessalonians that I said was not Paul's was written around 85 CE. And then Revelations and things from John, like 95, 96 CE. So are you seeing the gaps here?
Yes.
You're seeing the creative writing that's happening with the church fathers who are creating rules and dogma, right? Of how people need to be with God. And if you want to be with God and you believe what they're saying, then they have you, don't they? So this is the time, my friends, for you to do your own research. You know, is what the Rev's saying bull hockey? Or are there studies done on this? Because there are. And the reason that we are doing this work is so that you get clear on what and who is God to you. Right? Because if we're on this spiritual journey, saying that God is within us, and we are all powerful, but there is this tiny voice inside of us that says, I need to say the magic phrase to be saved. Or I have to do confession to be saved. Then you're not in authenticity. You're split. So I'm just having these discussions with you so that you are living the question and discerning what's true. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down. Remember, when was this written?
50.
Okay, the first one was 50, is the second that was 96, 97. Yes. And what was going on when this was written? They weren't working. And?
They were waiting.
Yes. The Romans were persecuting and they were waiting for Christ to come back. Yes. Okay. So that's why this letter existed. And so you know what I like to do now is I like to metaphysically break it down. So I use the Revealing Word, and I use the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, and then I use, some of my own intuition and guidance when I do this work. So the red comes from either Revealing Word or the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, and then the blue would be just mine. So I'm just going to give you a minute to look at that. So for Lord, it can be the activity of the I am, it can be Christ's mind, divine consciousness, all of those things are the same. And then we get here. The activity of the I am will descend from the realm of divine mind with a cry of command, with spiritual thoughts, call, and with waves of harmonious energy of absolute good. And those who died believing in the perfect idea of God will awaken. And then we who are of the Christ, who are left, shall be caught up together with them in spiritual understanding, to remember our divine consciousness in the breath of God. And so we shall always be with the Christ mind.
Yes.
Very different, isn't it? Yeah. So that's our work to do, my loves, right? We talk about not literal interpretation. Why do we do that? Because we have to understand what the context is. What was going on in that culture? What was the intention of the writer? We have to do that to really understand why they would say the weird things that they said. Because some of it's really weird. Okay. So, this is from Charles Fillmore. I thought it's really beautiful. This is the first and second coming of Christ, spoken of in the scriptures. The first coming is the receiving of truth into the conscious mind. And the second coming is the awakening and regeneration of the subconscious mind through Christ's mind. That's why we're doing the work that we're doing, my friends. That's why we're on this spiritual journey. To really get that at our core we are divinity. And we are here for a higher purpose.
Yes.
So I know that this was probably the most difficult conversation that we've had together.
Yeah.
But I really hope that it gives you a foundation to be in the question of what you really believe. This will also set us up really nicely for next week, where we're going to be talking about, is there life after death? Okay? Yeah, we're going there.
Oh, wow.
Okay.